Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce is dedicated to creating a global awareness of profitability and sustainability of African American businesses that support the Gullah Geechee community. Today, I talk with the founder, president, and CEO of the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce, Marilyn Hemingway, for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Marilyn Hemingway, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here again.
Yes, indeed, absolutely. The last time I spoke with you was in August, right about here on the peninsula of Charleston, and I want to make it abundantly clear that you are the founder, the president, CEO of the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce, which is dedicated to creating a global awareness of profitability and sustainability of African American businesses and entities that support the Gullah Geechee community. Well, let me ask you this. What businesses are profitable and sustainable right now within the Gullah Geechee corridor?
Well, the traditional businesses, funeral homes. Unfortunately, during the time of COVID, they're probably doing good, really good business. Let's just say it. The traditional businesses that we think about when it comes to the Black community, the funeral homes and select restaurants and very select restaurants that people, go to and support, and also because they offer good food. But the insurance companies, those type of office type, professional type services.
And let me ask you, with the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce, what's new, what's now?
Wow, there's a lot going on. We're kicking off in 2022 the Gullah Geechee Seafood Trail, which is a tourism vehicle and also a preservation vehicle. So we received a grant for a little under $283,000 from the federal government, NOAA in particular, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, to preserve and promote the Gullah Geechee maritime heritage, and also to establish and promote the Gullah Geechee Seafood Trail, which is going to be a foodway website promoting our restaurants, the oyster harvesters, the shrimpers, the crabbers, the fishermen and women, and other businesses associated with seafood, water, and the ocean. If you are someone who's an artist, a creator that uses water or celebrates water in your creations, we want you to be on that website also, because the bottom line is we want to, on a global scale, invite people to come in and spend their money with Gullah Geechee businesses.
What is the state of the maritime heritage along the Gullah Geechee corridor?
Can you say that again?
Yes, ma'am. What is the state of the maritime heritage along the Gullah Geechee corridor?
We have a rich heritage, but to be quite frank, we have lost many of our restaurants because of COVID. Many of our traditions of oyster harvesting, shrimping, crabbing, fishing, in particular, oyster harvesting, shrimping, and crabbing are under pressure because, as you know, for many decades now, young folks have been leaving for better educational and economic opportunity. We have not always recognized the economic opportunity within our culture. And that's why we established the Gullah Geechee Seafood Trail. There's an educational component that's embedded in our culture as a part of this grant. And that we hope will allow people to see that if I am home or I come back home and become an oyster harvester or a shrimper, I can actually make a good living. But we really have to be frank and honest about that. Good living may not necessarily be directly tied to going out on that boat every day during shrimping season, but also providing experiences to visitors, selling merchandising, or creating a brand for your business to sell merchandising, basically telling your story so people can buy the experience or buy the shrimp from you, and then also making contracts maybe with larger companies. So right now the state is it's not dire, but it's shaky. And we have to make real investments in our community, in our culture, in particular the aquaculture. That's the term, kind of the umbrella term for everything, aquaculture, to save these small and micro businesses, but also help them become sustainable.
Now, how many of those harvest, or, harvest, excuse me, how many of those shrimpers and harvesters are there in along your corridor, I should say?
That's actually a good question. So what we're finding out as we go out and about introducing the seafood trail to the communities is that um, there are very few owners left. And when I say owners, shrimpers, for example, who own the boat. And we're
Mm.
still learning who's out there. So I can't give you a firm number. We do know it's very low. What we are finding is we work for other companies. We work for other shrimp boats. So we are still shrimpers. We may not necessarily own the shrimp boats. And the same for the oyster harvesters. We may be maintaining oyster beds. It doesn't mean that we actually have the lease to harvest the oyster bed.
Mm.
And this is part of the process why we're doing what we're doing is to quantify the data so we can make some decisions, so we can say, what can we do over here to help them become more sustainable, help them grow? But first, you have to know. So part of the grant is we're doing 4 focus groups in different areas up and down the coast. We're doing 40 interviews. And of course, I'll be going out to city and county council meetings introducing the trail. I've already been in the communities and will continue to be in the communities introducing myself, the Gullah Geechee Seafood Trail, the Gullah Geechee Chamber, and hopefully the communities will be open to what we're trying to do, and we can work together as stakeholders and grow this aquaculture economy.
Where exactly is the seafood trail?
It's right now the grant covers the South Carolina coastline.
Okay.
So if you know the Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor, so from North Carolina border to the Georgia border and 60 miles inland is the Gullah Geechee Seafood Trail. We're going to, once this grant is for 2 years. So once we gather the data, and this is kind of all going to kind of work together at the same time. It won't be like necessarily year 1, year 2. We got to do these exact things, but we're going to have physical place markers
Mm.
at the venues, the restaurants, the creators, at where they're conducting business, and then we'll also have the website where we'll have the virtual place marker on the website. But right now, we are following the South Carolina coastline. I do want to say this. I just got back from Georgia,
Right.
Brunswick, Georgia last week
Right.
because we knew we were going to expand the trail across all 4 states. And so many people and organizations are excited about it that they've already reached out to us to get involved in their states, to be stakeholders and partners. So we have those tentacles already growing into the other states to bring in the Gullah Geechee Seafood Trail.
Now, with the expansion of the seafood trail, Marilyn, how much money would that bring in?
Wow. Well, let me put it this way. The Gullah Geechee Cultural Heritage Corridor Commission conducted a market research study.
Okay.
That market research study stated that Gullah Geechee tourism has a $34 billion potential.
Mm.
The Gullah Geechee Seafood Trail is part of the infrastructure that we're building in partnership with the Corridor Commission to go out and get that $34 billion. So that's $34 billion annually across 4 states. If we get only 1% of that potential, that's $34 million. So I can safely say the potential of what money it will generate will be in the millions.
Wow. And let me get back to the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce and generalities. How
Mhm.
would the how will the region in South Carolina be different as a result of your chamber's work?
Well, we'll be more organized. So the traditional businesses that I noted, insurance companies, funeral homes, etc., those professional services, attorneys, professional service, um, they're in place. They have an infrastructure advertising. One of the things we're focusing on is how do we look at our culture and how do we participate or even lead in that tourism industry, which is $1 billion industry. Well, we look at our culture, and that culture will allow us, as I like to say, and some people, no one's ever told me they disagree with this, but you can feel free to disagree with y'all. Come and call and tell me. But we've got to understand that we need to monetize 10% of our culture so we can retain ownership of 100% of our culture. And that's what we're teaching. And that's what we're putting the infrastructure in place for. Because right now, we don't have a strong infrastructure within the Gullah Geechee community to take advantage of the opportunities in tourism that's before us. Traditionally, we have participated in the tourism industry as labor. We really have not been owners. The Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce is about ownership. We need to, one, own our story, own our culture, own our narrative, so we can say, okay, 10% of what I know and own or create, I'm going to promote so that I can bring in funds to my businesses, to my families, to my communities. And that's how we're going to be economically independent and create generational wealth.
How do you own the story right now, Marilyn?
Recognize who we are. Our story, our legacy, is very roughly parallels the Native American story, disconnected from our language, disconnected from our culture and community, in particular after the Civil War. And you can see where inland Gullah Geechee more so were disconnected because Northern abolition, not knocking the effort, came down as, oh, that's bad English. We're going to correct you. They did that with the Native Americans by taking them into boarding schools and teaching them English, trying to assimilate. And it created a disconnect. Thank God that the sea islands, those who were more isolated, retained the culture. But you see that changing when bridges start going to the islands.
Right.
But we still have those isolated pockets, but they're disappearing because of gentrification, overdevelopment, and climate change. Now water is rising and we're getting that pressure also. So we have to go back to our roots. And I say we, I'm obviously generalizing. It is not all of us. There are those who have been working to retain the culture and uplift the culture for decades. So I always give them honor and kudos. The difference with the chamber is the economic lane. We made a decision that how do we use economics to establish a foundation? So we looked at the economics of it and said, there are people who are willing to spend money to learn more about us, to come in beds and heads, as they say in the hotels, put the foot through the doors to restaurants, little museums, anything. But we have to own that because prior to that, we were either disconnected by others or even our culture was appropriated by others who would come in and record our stories and take our stories and then go back and sell books, sell food, sell our story, sell our art, our creations, and the money would not come back to the community. It is our goal to change that. And that's what we're doing in partnership with many organizations that understand the work that needs to be done.
What is the foundation right now?
The foundation of the culture,
Yes, ma'am.
the people. The foundation of your culture are always the people. What I do see is the change that's happening now is I think people are becoming more aware and appreciative of the Gullah culture and who we are. You see it in the younger folks. Geechee Experience is one
Right.
group. The brother and sister, I love them, who understand the culture. But I think they also understand, and I've never spoken to them about this, that the Gullah Geechee culture is an evolutionary culture. And what do I mean by that? It started with the roots of evolution. It took African tribal languages, English and even Spanish, and made a whole new language so people could communicate to each other because they were taken from their motherland, separated amongst uh, buildings and then on boats, ships, and they had to communicate with each other to survive. So imagine the intellect it took to establish a whole new language and culture. Because we're more than just a language. We're how we eat, what we eat, how we worship, our spiritual lives, how we read and write and everything. That's evolutionary. And even in 2022, you see it where folks just take the language and the way we eat and they take a new spin on it. Or you could go to different communities within the Gullah community and see how they took a different spin on the language, on how they cook the food, but it's still embedded in that foundation because it's people. It's people, but it's also an evolutionary foundation. And I say that deliberately because all too often you hear people say, "Oh, it's dying. The language is dying." It's not dying. It's evolving. And that's its strength because it comes from people
When did it started to evolve?
from day one. Because even on those ships, people got split up. And if you look at the transatlantic slave route and where the ships went, and we say facetiously, the only difference is where the boat stopped. Where the boat stopped in the Caribbean islands, the boat stopped in South America, and the boat stopped in North America.
Right.
So I tell people, we are already a global community. We evolved where we stopped. And then we took that language and we marinated it and we seasoned it and we sauced it, but we still were embedded in what our ancestors took from their motherland. So we're all cousins, whether in South America, North America, or the Caribbean islands. Many of us have yet to realize that. And of course, back to West Africa.
Right.
We're all family. So from day one, we've been evolutionary because we've had to adjust to the geographic area. We've had to adjust to the pressures that we were under. And we didn't merely survive. In many ways, we thrived.
What pressures are you underneath right now, Marilyn?
But the community is underneath the pressure of overdevelopment, gentrification, and climate change. And let's start with climate change.
Okay.
Because we tend to live on the islands, the low-lying areas, rising waters are impacting us, not only through flooding, but acidification of the water. That's still obviously is an ongoing issue and is being studied. We know that salt water is now getting in the areas where it wasn't before. So it's actually killing trees. It's killing the land where salt's not supposed to be. So we're being forced off land. Overdevelopment, the pressure of gentrification, where folks are coming in and building where they never built before, and with rising taxes, everything rises. The bad stuff, when the bad stuff rises, water, flooding, taxes, we're getting hit. Especially economically, the pressure is, it took us almost 500 years to make $7.25 an hour. And I say 500 because the first enslaved Africans stepped on Georgetown County land in 1526.
Right.
And in 2026, it'll be 500 years. So traditionally, we've either been not paid or underpaid for our labor. So when prices rise, we get the hit first. And those are the type of pressures that we're feeling. And you got to address those pressures deliberately, intentionally, and strategically. This is not going to happen by luck, or it's not going to happen by happenstance, that if I take care of this over here, it'll trickle down and help the other communities. It never worked that way, and it never will. We have to be intentional, deliberate, and strategic in solving the pressures, the challenges faced by the Gullah Geechee community.
And this might be a redundant question, but what are the pressures of gentrification?
Rising taxes is one. Rising property taxes, I should say.
Sure.
low wages, you're not able to keep up with the maintenance of your homes. So eventually your um, home values decrease because of that. But also, home values decrease because traditionally our communities have been redlined, and that means the house value has been artificially deflated. So when you sell it, you can't go and buy a house that's equivalent because in the meantime, gentrification's happening. So you may own a 4-bedroom, 3-bath house and sell it, but because it's undervalued, you can't turn around and go buy another 4-bedroom, 3-bedroom house. That's real loss of wealth and value. And that's something that we need to look at that people don't necessarily talk about. Gentrification, when people put highways through our communities, um, I know of instances where people have had to leave areas 2 or 3 times because the decision has been made. We're going to put a highway through this community. You give them just enough money for how the person controlling that highway values your home, and they end up staying in debt because mortgage is simply debt. So if you're constantly moving every 10 to 20 years, you're never paying off that mortgage because you got to go get another mortgage. So those type of pressures, nuances of pressure that we don't necessarily talk about and we need to talk about more. And I think people are talking about it more, but I don't think it's really hit people that these type of undervaluing of your homes, rising taxes at the same time, low incomes are really impactful on our communities.
I, I'll just ask it. I don't know if you'll understand it, but what are the hidden pressures right now that you're seeing when it comes to gentrification?
Lack of knowledge. And what do I mean by that? If you don't know, that's the pressure, because you're wondering. I'm here. I'm working. I'm doing some of us 2 or 3 jobs, and I just can't seem to get ahead. And the lack of knowledge is not understanding how your government works, not understanding who influences the government, not understanding how you can influence the government. Um, how can you influence the process? Um, for example, in Georgetown County right now, we're going through a comprehensive plan,
Right.
and 70% of the respondents of a citizen survey is from the Waccamaw Neck, which is highly overdevelopment. And they want to hop over to the western portion of the county, which is where most of the Gullah Geechee Black folks live. But the response to the survey is 70% from the Waccamaw Neck. Obviously, it's too low on the other side of the community. But the chamber, one of the things we do is we educate. We let people know. We actually have physical copies of the survey. We're out telling people, fill out the survey. They got to hear our voices. Those are just the lack of knowledge so you can make informed decisions is a huge hidden factor on everything. Climate change, gentrification, overdevelopment, low incomes, lower valuation of your homes. Because if you don't have the knowledge of how it works, how are you going to fight it? And
And,
that's something we don't think about, but we need to get more knowledge.
and
I
how
hope that answered your question.
I believe so. Yes, ma'am. How has your organization increased prosperity, reduced poverty, and improved quality of life in those areas such as Georgetown County?
I think right now we're supporting small businesses and giving more knowledge out. I cannot quantify um, what you're asking for, but we're going to do that because we're still a startup organization. As of March of this year, we've been around 4 years, and it's mostly been me. And I've grown. I have wonderful volunteers, starting to get a team around me that can support and understand the culture. But just for example, some this things that we do. We do ribbon cuttings. Coming up this Wednesday at 12 noon, the Allied Access Insurance Group is going to have a grand reopening, and that's because of growth. They're a member of the chamber. We've helped publicize them. They've been on my show. Um, and we hope that we've played a part and will continue a part in their growth. Not only are they offering insurance services, they're going to be offering flex space for other entrepreneurs and small businesses to rent space or use phone services, PO box. Those are the type of conversations that we have so other businesses can grow. And of course, with the Gullah Geechee Seafood Trail, that's another opportunity to promote businesses and also to do business education. We're going to be offering classes so that small micro businesses know the business of doing businesses so they can become legal and take advantage of the opportunities that are being presented. Because the Gullah Geechee Seafood Trail, we want you to be successful. So for you to be successful, we want to get you educated to the point where you can be on the website and it's effective and successful rather than just saying, come on and be on the website. No, we want to set you up for success. So we're putting in our infrastructure for the greater community infrastructure. So a year from now, ask me that question again.
Yes, ma'am. And this might be a redundant question because I think you've already answered. But how are you creating jobs and increasing capital investment in the region by recruiting new businesses and helping existing companies to expand?
Well, we're starting internally first by creating my team around me. So directly creating those type of jobs. And we're still startup. So a lot of part-time contractors. And then from there, as our businesses improve and grow, they're going to be hiring more folks. Once again, the insurance group I just talked about,
Right.
she hiring new staff, and recruiting. We haven't moved in actual recruiting yet. That's down the road.
Okay.
That we're
Okay.
actually recruiting businesses. What we do is encourage people to come as tourists and visitors and spend their money with Gullah Geechee businesses. But one thing aspect, and that's such a good question that you had, we're informally recruiting people to come back home. 80% of African Americans trace their roots back to the Gullah Geechee community, the Gullah Geechee corridor. And we want some of them folks to come back home and open businesses because the opportunity is vast. But right now we're concentrating on who's here, the folks who are home, local, and showing them their opportunities, especially in tourism, going back to what we talked about, owning that narrative, recognizing people want authentic creations, grandma's quilts, mama's quilts, bath and body stuff. The sweetgrass basket makers are a prime example, and we hope to work with them more, more organized than most. But there are other people doing things, grandma's cake, grandma's pies, cookies, things they used to cook that grandma would give away at Christmas
Right.
or the presents to folks. And that there is economic opportunity in those creations, and we're working on some items to help folks promote and market those. But first, we want to set you up for success by offering business classes.
Now, in terms of economic development, Marilyn, what is that
Mhm.
organic market research that you are currently looking at?
Well, our focus groups and our interviews are the beginning of going into the community and finding out where they are, the knowledge they have, what they want to share.
Yes.
It is not about exploitation.
Right.
So if folks tell us we don't want you to share this, we won't share it. And I've been very adamant about that with our collaborative partners. So everything is not going to end up being in the public eye. But going into community groups, I get invited to different groups, and I just sit there and talk sometimes. Probably a lot more has gone in the air and out the air than I've actually recorded. But and it's kind of sad, but now we're going to formalize it a little bit more. So I'm glad you asked that question. So I'm going to let everybody know when I come, I'm going to ask and get permission. Can we record it? And I know it has happened a lot in the past, but I like to see us, along with other groups like Gullah Geechee Nation, Gullah Geechee Fishing Association, that we make sure we have ownership of that materials and that it is respected and how it is distributed.
Yeah. And I know in the last interview that we did in August, and you mentioned it just a little bit a few minutes ago, but how many of those businesses are actually legal with an LLC and actually registered with the Secretary of State's office? Most of the Gullah Geechee businesses.
Not enough.
Oh.
And that's part of it. Good question again. Quintin, we don't know how many. We know there are many. And, it could be, and we have to be careful with that because, especially with food, I'm not going to call out even descriptions because where we know people who do food in various ways and they deliver it may not necessarily be legal. And I caution them that if you are doing food on a certain scale in your community, please take that time to become legal, study USDA regulations, and make sure you're meeting those. Because if one person gets sick or something happens, that's on you. But so I'm very cautious about that because I don't want to hurt people.
Right.
Because they provide a great service to the community. They feed people who are hungry.
Sure.
But they have to be cautious about it. Then there are folks who are making things that may be selling them and not quite legal. And it's not hard. It could be a sole proprietor, LLC, basic, bookkeeping, etc. And then when you're in a position to even grow, you might end up hiring a family member. It becomes a family business, but you got to be legal to do that. Do we have hard numbers? No, we don't, because that's the nature of it. It's under the table. It's quietly done. We can make some assumptions, but people are not going to be necessarily forthcoming with that information.
And I know you want to empower social impact business and economic vibrancy, that is, in the community. What has been that impact over the past 4 years?
Raising awareness. One is what we just discussed about being under the table, people being more aware of, I can open up more opportunities for me if I'm above the table, if I'm a legal business. That has been an impact that I know of because I have these conversations all the time.
Okay.
Just the tourism impact, people thinking out of the box. I do know of businesses that are being created now, that are realizing I used to do that, but now I can make it a business and grow it and maybe keep my children here because now they have a family business to inherit. That is growing in Georgia and beyond. I just came back, I think I already mentioned that, Brunswick, Georgia last week. Up and down the coast, I'm invited to different communities. I'm heading to Columbia tomorrow for an event. It's in Columbia, but it's still connected to the Gullah Geechee community. It's just more awareness. I get phone calls. As a matter of fact, while we're on the line, I've gotten 2 phone calls.
I better let you go.
Oh, no, you're good. We're good. I don't know. You can wrap it up. But I'm not rushing you. But I'm building these relationships through the chamber. It's giving me that opportunity to build relationships to benefit the community up and down the coast and all 4 states of the corridor. So y'all, it's many opportunities. Y'all need to get excited. I just see the opportunities, and you call me and we can just talk about it. I get people call me and they want to help. A volunteer from Maryland.
Wow.
She lives in Maryland, but came home for the holidays from here. And she said, I see what you're doing. I just want to volunteer. And she's trying to figure out a career path. And once again, I'm still a startup. I wish I could just say, I got all these jobs and I want to hire you, but I'm not in that position yet. But let me tell you, in the next year to 2, we're going to be in that position, if not sooner.
That is amazing. And how have you put the chamber on a healthy journey for the next 5 to 10 years?
Right now, we're going through strategic planning. And I do have a business plan. I started this with a business plan. And now we're going through getting ready to start our strategic planning, surrounding myself by a team with certain skills that I don't have. And so I can go be CEO and president and build relationships. I've also established not only the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce, but the Gullah Geechee Chamber Foundation. That's the 501c3 where we go get grants. And in the last year, we've received slightly under $400,000 in grants. As a matter of fact, Grace sent a press release out about most recent grant. And the Gullah Geechee Leadership Institute, which is our Issues Policy Leadership Institute. I'm actually probably going to be closing that one down in 2022 because I want to change the mission. I have grown and learned from the communities, I want to be more strategic and intentional. And that mission doesn't quite fit. So I'm going to do what I need to do with the paper and shut that down. And sometimes you got to shut something down to grow. And that's what we'll be doing. But that was our policies, and it's an issues organization, and it's not quite hitting where I need it to hit. So I'm going to shut it down and reopen it with something else. Those are the decisions that we're making now strategically so that we can position ourselves for growth. Because for us, 2022 is a year of growth. But also, a friend of mine, Brandon Upson, I got to give him credit because I'm stealing it from him. Delegate to elevate.
Okay.
I'm delegating to elevate and take advantage of putting our internal infrastructure, making it stronger, and then taking advantage of the opportunities for the Chamber family of organizations.
What more have you learned about the Gullah Geechee Nation since you've taken over as the founder, the president, CEO of the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce?
How resilient our community is, how creative we are, the imagination, and resilience in what our ancestors faced and what they put in place so that we can do what we can do today. And they didn't know the future. They couldn't see everything, but they knew that they had to do certain things for future generations. And that's what I've learned. But I've also learned that to honor that, I have to use my imagination and put the work in so that I plant the seeds for future generations. And that's simply what I'm doing. And some folks may have heard the term Sankofa, and that's simply what Sankofa is. Looking back and honoring the past so you can work in the present to create the future, even not knowing what that future is going to look like. But we've got to do what we've got to do. And that's what I've learned as Gullah Geechee, that we are a foundational culture. We are not a subculture. We are a foundational culture of not only African American culture and history, but of American culture and history. And that's a beautiful thing.
And I know you talk a lot about growth throughout this particular interview, but what do you think will be the top four job creators along the corridor in the next 5 years?
For specifically the Gullah Geechee
Yes, ma'am.
culture and community, tourism. I would say tourism is number one. Professional services, because as the tourism industry creates more small, micro, and large businesses, we're going to need lawyers and CPAs to handle that, to help those businesses grow. So those type of professional services, our maritime heritage, I think our port cities, Georgetown, Charleston, Savannah, Jacksonville,
Buford?
thank you. Buford, and there's one more in there because I was reading about. Well, Buford, those are opportunities. Wilmington, thank you. That was the one.
That's what I was thinking.
Wilmington. So the maritime, there's opportunity for that growth. That's three. I haven't thought of a fourth, but those three, and they all are interconnected. They all speak to each other because I had to learn the maritime heritage is not just aquaculture. Our maritime heritage are the actual shipbuilding, the ports, the international longshoremen tend to be majority Black. That's our maritime heritage. That's the ports authority. That's our maritime heritage. And we need to celebrate that. And that's growth in that. Mm-hmm.
Marilyn.
And now the fourth one is environment.
Okay.
The environmental movement. We have got the environmental movement, and also, how can I put this? Historical preservation. We need more archaeologists. We need anthropologists. We need environmentalists. If we don't have a healthy environment, we cannot have healthy individuals. We can't have healthy businesses. We will not have a healthy community. And we need to preserve our cemeteries. This is part of telling our story. We need to preserve where our houses were. The story is not just the big mansions. The stories are the modest homes of middle class and low income folks tell a story, lots of stories that have been left off the table because we have not formally preserved them. So preservation, a huge opportunity in that, and that is growing. The South Carolina African American Heritage Commission, I think there are now over 400 African American historic markers around the state. That's huge growth within the last 10 years. Yeah, it's there, but we need young folks coming up, historians, the archaeologists, anthropologists, the researchers to study and quantify all that data.
Now, what will the environmental movement will be like in the next 5 years?
It better be more diverse. Let's be honest, it's actually traditionally it's very white and it's getting older. And if they don't have more diversity, then we're all going to hurt. I really truly believe that it is the indigenous people, the historically excluded, marginalized communities that are going to save all of us when it comes to the environmental movement. In many ways, we're going to have to go back to traditional methods of impacting the environment. And so we need to see more diversity, equity, and inclusion. And diversity is being engaged, showing up, getting knowledge, and being included. The equity is you need to pay people what they're worth within the field. Traditionally, these fields have been low paid because people coming into them have already have monetary means. But low pay doesn't mean folks who've been historically excluded can go in. We need to pay our bills. I mean, we need to pay our bills. So equity talks about you need to pay people real funds. And then inclusion includes diversity and equity, real inclusion where our voices are heard, respected, and magnified.
And I hope to get you back on Quintin's School Subs later this year so we can talk more in depth about equity and inclusion as well. But
Oh, I
Marilyn
got a
Hemingway,
lot to say about that.
I know you do. Marilyn Hemingway, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome back to Quintin's School Subs.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you next time. Just give me a call. And Happy New Year to everyone. And thank you. Have a great day.
Likewise.